Hello everyone, it's Carl here from Brrraaains A Head-Banging Life, GBHBL.com for short. I'm with Francis Roberts, vocalist and guitarist of, well, how would you say, eccentric rock band, King Gorm? I think that's the most simple way I can put it.
Are we eccentric? I'm not even sure what eccentric means these days. I suppose we have a lot of songs that are sort of different from each other on the album.
That's it. I would say eccentric. Just look at the images. If people are watching and listening and unsure of quite what King Gorm could be, just go look at a couple of pictures, and I think that might create a great bedrock to start with. Francis, it's obviously a pleasure to absolutely speak with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastically. Aside from living in the United States during this pandemic.
Of course.
Yeah.
You are obviously in the America. How's life then been? It's the elephant in the room. We can't start any interview without talking about it first. How has life been for you for the past couple of months, just in general with this pandemic?
I feel guilty saying it, but I've been fine.
Yeah.
Lucky almost. This is what I live in. So I'll show you real quick. So it's trash on the floor, like 5 guitars, mixing console, synthesizers, and recording computer. And there's the Hammond organ over there and some amplifiers. So
You're
lucky
living
me,
in the studio.
Yes, exactly. So I've actually recorded a couple of albums since the pandemic began, and I even played some live streaming shows with decent sound quality, and just almost done with another album on top of the ones that I've already done. So I'm just being very productive right now, just keeping my mind off of not being able to go to the pub, as you call it there. We call it bars here, obviously.
Oh my goodness. A couple of albums. Is this all King Gorm stuff, or is it just whatever's in your head?
I have a few projects that I write for. Probably the most well-known one up until we put the King Gorm album out is probably Old Man Wizard. It's I guess somewhat similar stylistically, musically. It's like same style of music. I'm singing and playing guitar and writing the music, so it's similar in that way. There's no organ in the band, so it's sounds a bit different, and it's a different drummer and a different bass player. But
yeah,
that's I'm almost done with writing an album for that project. I've put out an EP with I've got an electronic project called Yagashura, and that one's like it's like progressive rock meets electronic music, very like synthwave and video game inspired, but it also sounds a bit like maybe Pink Floyd or something at times.
That's a fascinating description.
I don't know if it's a good one. I'm not good at describing my own music. And then I've got like a sort of a dark ambient, like dungeon synth type of a project as well that I constantly just dump stuff on the internet. It's almost like I almost treat it as a warm up project. When I'm going to start writing music, I'll try to test some sounds, and I'll make something to see if the sounds are delightful to me. If they are, I'll just throw it on Bandcamp, and then I'll write some music for one of the projects that's a bit more complicated.
My goodness, there's so many eggs in one basket. How do you split them all apart? How do you differentiate beyond the obvious, where something's dungeon synth and something's King's Gorm or something's Old Man Wizard? How do you differentiate between the say, for example, Old Man Wizard and King Gorm then?
That's actually like I think an interesting question, because at first I usually I'll just write songs, and then if the song feels like it goes in my band, I'll put it there, and if not, then maybe I'll try to make it work on an acoustic guitar and take it to an oven mic night, and then forget about it forever. But with King Gorm, I started I had sort of started a band, like a progressive rock type of a band with a couple of friends many years ago, and a couple of the songs on the King Gorm album started there. That band didn't really work out, and maybe we had 1.5 of those songs became King Gorm songs eventually.
Okay.
But the bulk of the album was actually written in one day.
Oh wow!
I had some friends that were doing like a songwriting challenge where they were trying to write 20 songs in 12 hours. And I went for it one day just to see what it was like, and the output, as you can imagine, was worse than garbage. It's just like quantity over quality in every way, and I thought it was a fun exercise, and the biggest surprise that came out of that was realizing that it was possible for me to write 20 songs in 12 hours, even if they weren't good. I didn't like any of them.
Yeah.
So I tried again a few weeks later with cutting it down to 4 songs. And actually 3 of those 4 songs ended up on the King Gorm album in their entirety. I rearranged them for the band and stuff, but the songs themselves were written in that one day. And some of the ideas from the 4th one I think ended up on the album as well. So that was just kind of like a exercise, and it was before there was a band to go with them. And what ended up happening was I think I showed the songs to Old Man Wizard and said, hey, would you want to record these with me? And I think the answer was that they were a little bit too sword and sorcery and corny even for Old Man Wizard. So we ended up just not doing that, and I thought, it would be fun to do the band was originally going to be drums, bass, vocals, and 3 electric guitars. And I decided that I didn't want that many people in a band. I don't think I could get along with 6 people in a band again, because I used to be in a 9-piece band. That was a absolute a fucking nightmare. You don't have any children watching, right?
It's we're marked as an 18 channel, so swearing is rarely an issue.
Children say fuck anyway these days. I'd seen a friend. I have a few friends that play in the video game tribute video game music tribute scene. I don't know if you have one of those in England, but we've got some bands here that will do songs from old Nintendo games and stuff. And some of my friends were playing in a band that had guitars and keyboards, and would use sort of a guitar sounding patch on the synthesizer to do a harmonized lead with the guitar. And it sounds like a guitar lead if you put the guitar on top, and it sounds like a synthesizer if you put the guitar on the bottom. So you put the 2 notes together and you end up with the combined timbre of those 2 instruments. And I realized that I can get that sort of Iron Maiden, Judas Priest style double guitar lead sound with a guitar and a synthesizer. And a synthesizer can sit on top of an organ. That's what they used to do in the 70s, right? So no one does that anymore. Well, some people do, but it's less common, I think, these days. And so I was like, how do you get a good organ sound? And I was playing around with plugins on my computer and stuff, and got sick of it. I couldn't get an organ to sound good, so I went and bought a Hammond. And the cool thing about those is, even though there are these days, I'll admit that there are very believable Hammond sounds on the computer. You can get them through Native Instruments makes a good one, and Arturia makes a good one. But the thing about a computer program is that you can't set a synthesizer on top of it.
I do, yeah.
And an organ just requires one. It's its own stand, really. So you can set whatever synth you want on top of it. So I figured, the organ will play the part that I had for the rhythm guitar. The synth will play the part that I had for the lead guitar, and then the other guitar will play the other leads. And that's what happened. Is I took those 3 guitar songs and I rebuilt them for a keyboard player with 2 different keyboards stacked on top of each other. And that's where we ended up. And I was going to record the album. Asked one of my friends if he wanted to play bass and drums on it, and that's Eric, who is the bass player in King Gorm. And he was like, we should find a drummer and a keyboard player and just actually record the album instead of doing it part by part.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing it live, and we put a band together and did some shows, and went to a studio and put everything in the room together, and we just overdubbed the vocals. We just recorded all the instruments live. We didn't multi-track any of it, really.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Came out very, very well then, considering the DIY aesthetic to that.
Yeah, it's after doing it, I realized that that's a big piece of that, that classic sound. I've always tried to get that on a computer with tape emulation plugins and stuff like that, and I didn't realize that a big piece of it is the microphone bleed of the drums are picking up a little bit of the organ, and the bass is picking up a little bit of the guitar. All the instruments are there being played at the same time, and you can't really. It's hard to recreate that sort of crosstalk between the different instruments in a recording artificially.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You're obviously very technologically astute and turned on to what's required and what you can use in modern music. yet you obviously realized and employed traditional things from certain eras, that bygone eras. It's incredible it turned out that way.
You know, I mean, we went to the studio and we said we want it to sound as much like Machine Head as you can do. And then the the engineer said, "Well, lucky you, we've actually got the same model of tape machine that they used on that album." So
Oh, fantastic.
we used the same 16 track that was used on that Deep Purple record. Not the same exact one, obviously, but the same make and model.
Oh yeah, yeah. I can't, if it was the same one, it'd be a bit dusty by now, I'd imagine.
Oh, I'm sure some of them are. I think the console was owned previously by Sublime, and then before that by Leonard Skinner. So like when you record on like vintage equipment like that, the stuff that you end up recording on is kind of a kind of a big dusty joke, unless it's maintained well.
Yeah, yeah, but it's historic as well. I mean, that challenge as well, going back to that, I've never heard of it done with music. I've only heard of something like that done with video games, funny enough, you know, like a 48-hour game jam where the idea is to make a mobile game in 48 hours. So do you just, it seems like you just enjoy constantly challenging yourself.
Um, I wouldn't say that I enjoy it, but I feel compelled to do it.
Okay. The compelling nature.
I've done one of those game jams before because it seemed like a good idea. Ended up with something that was playable but not excellent. I did this like the sounds and the music for it, and it was fun. It was a fun experience. I would do it again.
I've heard those things can be rough.
Yeah, I take a break for a few weeks between attempts.
Yeah. So, you know, back to sort of the COVID times, did it make building towards the release of the debut album, because obviously 31st of July, you were building towards it throughout. Did that make it any more difficult?
That's I don't know. I'd like to think that the album would have been well received with or without a pandemic. But I have a feeling that people are more receptive right now to things that are happening on the internet.
Yeah.
And I think that we may have actually had a bit of a boon by releasing it right now. Just because people are actually on their social media looking for something new and something new to watch, something new to listen to and experience. And, you know, we recorded the album, I think in 2018, and didn't have a label to put it out. We ended up on like a small Canadian label, and they dropped us for personal reasons. With the label owner had a medical emergency and had to drop all of his new releases basically. And it was kind of like a no hard feelings, but we can't do this right now. And I was going to self-release it, sort of got carried away and doing some other stuff. We had a band member left the band, and we were going to try to put together a new band so we could tour on the album before releasing it. And then a pandemic happens, and I was supposed to be on tour, so I had basically canceled my entire life for 2 weeks or so to do a solo tour, playing some of the like synthesizer music that I do. And that got canceled because all the flights got canceled and everything got canceled basically, right?
Yeah.
And then I had like a week and a half, 2 weeks to do absolutely fuck all, right? And so right around then I got a message from Dylan, the drummer, and he was like, "Are we going to release the album or what?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, let's do it." I've actually got time to put it together. So I put together like a self-release, and then we put together like a PR campaign, and finally like put out the first single, put out a music video, and within a few hours of the music video being on the internet, I got hit up by like I think 3 record labels wanting to put it out on LP, and that's nothing even close to that has ever happened to me before. I've always had to like be the one that reaches out to the label, and it was just like, holy shit, like what what's going on here? Is this actually as good as you're making it me feel like it might be? And I think that it's a pretty good album. I think it's one of the better things that I've put out. But I was just really blown away by the positive reaction that it was getting right from the get-go like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you because we've had about 2 weeks now from it being out in the public spectrum, not so much the labels and all that, from a fan perspective and people who know your work and so on, how have you found that reaction? Do you pay much attention to the comments and the feedback that you get online?
Oh yeah. I look at I see most of it, and I think that like I think people don't realize it, but that seems to be true on much higher levels than myself. Even people that are actually quite famous are pretty aware of of that stuff. And I've toured with bands that are more popular than I am, and like they'll be in the bus and they'll be on their phone looking at comments and Facebook messages and looking at hashtags on Twitter and Instagram and making jokes about making up stories about the people's lives that are making
Oh,
these
goodness
sad
me.
like self defeating comments. And like you can tell so much about someone by how mean they're willing to be to strangers on the internet.
Mhm. Yep. That's always a fascinating side to it. Obviously, you've got the balance of, oh, you got so much positivity, but the loudest voices, more than any, are often the negative voices.
Oh god,
How
yeah.
do you handle that side of things? Do you just laugh it off?
It depends. It really does. There's a lot of things to do with that. I'm trying to think of some of the most negative remarks I've seen about this or something else. I don't know. I think I don't know if I'm successful enough to attract that kind of negativity. It seems
Okay.
like those really negative remarks seem to come more and more often. The more popular you get, the more money you're making, the more fans you have. I think people that make those types of remarks are often just jealous of the position, and my position isn't really something to be especially jealous of. I'm not, I'm not exactly making a living at this album. It's not paying my bills.
Yeah.
So if it was, maybe I'd get more negative remarks, but maybe I'm wrong about that too.
No, I think you've nailed a certain element in the sense that when you've made it, when your comment section is just filled with people telling you how much you suck.
Yeah. Why are you here listening to it if it sucks?
Yes. So it's a fascinating concept kind of behind King Gorm from a certain aspect. Bard-like tales, fantasy-based, with a modern spin on classic rock. Was that something that you kind of you thought, yeah, that's what I'm going to focus on? Or was it just something that naturally fell into your lap when it came to it?
um Well, as far as the lyrics go, from pretty early on, I had the idea of like putting together like a fantasy setting
Mm-hmm.
that the lyrics would take place in. I think those types of devices are really helpful in writing songs. Um, excuse me. I don't think almost nobody has enough personal experiences to, you know, have a constant output of very personal, honest songs.
Fair enough, yeah.
And if you can employ some of the devices that fiction writers use to have an output of magazine articles or novels or whatever it is, games and movies, um, you can take the experiences of those characters, which are often, like you draw parallels between those characters that you can invent in your own experiences and your friends' experiences. But by employing those types of devices, I think that you can put a lot more music out, write a lot more lyrics. So I would say some of the songs are the fantasy theme is an afterthought, but some of them it's sort of the driving force behind like what makes this tick, or how did I put this together.
And so what would it be? Would it be a matter of, I don't know, you watched something or read something or played something and you thought, okay, and it triggered something in your brain in regards to the ones that you say you focused on and the more fantastical elements?
Um, I think that stuff that I read and play has a little bit more to do with the way that I write fantasy-driven lyrics than stuff that I watch. I feel like if you're watching like a TV show or a movie, it's that idea has already been realized so clearly and vividly that there's not too much left to do with it in a lot of situations. It's always surprising to me how many people have like explicitly Lord of the Rings themed music, for example, and it's like I don't know. I can see why they do it. It's a fun theme. It's a great world building.
Yeah.
But um, there's excellent films, excellent all kinds of media relating
Yeah.
to it. So I don't. I'd rather like make something else instead. And there's definitely some influence from something like that, but there's also going to be influence from more obscure things, whatever random stuff that I've picked up or read along the way, or games that I've played, even tabletop role playing
Mhm.
games, things like that. I've got a background with like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff in that genre.
Fascinating. I love that because you're right. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of bands that can go and cover the Skyrim theme song and the likes, and do variations on Game of Thrones or The Witcher and stuff like that. So it's that more obscure stuff, as you said, that I personally find way more interesting, even if I don't necessarily know what it is or I'm aware of what the selling point or what it is that inspired you. It's still going to get my attention. And another variation on the Lord of the Rings theme that was done in the movie so bloody well.
Hmm.
What about comparisons then? Because comparisons are inevitable, and comparisons are easily made towards King Gorm and, like, say, Rainbow, Deep Purple. It's based off the sound more than anything else, Richie Blackmore and so on. It's inevitable, but I don't think it's something that defines King Gorm, at least what I'm aware of from the album. How did you balance then the kind of, all right, it's going to have a classic rock stylings, but it's going to be done in a more modern setting from a modern band? How did you balance that?
Um, well, I like I said, before I wrote the songs
Mm,
without that instrumentation in mind. Um, and at some point I decided I was thinking about like if I'm going to put together a new band for this music, um, what's the best band? Like
yeah,
what's the best overall sound? Like because when you have a band, you have to think about a few things. Like obviously you can get like the best studio quality sound if you have everything that you want. Right? You look at the rosters on maybe like a Michael Jackson tour, and you look at what the band is, and it's like it's drums, bass, guitar, sometimes like a third guitar, at least 3 keyboard players, like an army of backup vocalists, backup dancers, and it's just like how do you make it sound like a studio album?
hmm,
And well, that's wonderful if you have the money for it, and the time for it, and it's really hard to. There's an interesting thing that comes with success, which is that if you are making as much money as someone like that,
yeah.
suddenly you have the band size that you want is something that you actually can't organize without paying them. Like you
Right.
can't. There's no good way to have like a 15-piece band and actually have all of their schedules line up unless everyone's getting paid to be there.
Mhm.
And when you're on a low level, the most important piece of being in a band, I think, is to make sure that the schedules can line up so that you can actually get together and do the music.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so I thought that maybe I've done 3-piece bands, 4-piece bands. I don't think I've ever been. No, I've been in a 5-piece band, 6-piece, 7-piece, 8-piece, 9-piece. Um, and I've done duos. So I've done everything from 1 to 9 people. And I
Mm,
think that the sweet spot for like being able to put out sound and have like a big full sound, and like an engaging stage show, and having the schedules able to line up somehow is around 4.
yeah.
3 is great for scheduling. It's really easy to do, but usually there's something a little bit brittle about the sound. Um, but yeah, I thought that the 4-piece would be a solid place to go there. And thinking about 4-piece bands, how do you make a 4-piece that works? You can think of like Metallica, Megadeth, a band like that that's got guitar, bass, drums. It's sort of a
Yeah.
classic heavy metal lineup. It works really well, but it's a bit thin when both guitars are playing melody. I think
Yeah.
live, like you listen to the Metallica records, and they recognize that, and they'll record an extra guitar part behind the double leads to fill in the sound. And the 4-piece sound that I think I decided works the best was that 1970s sound.
Yeah.
The cool thing about that is that it just sort of started getting ignored after people stopped using organs because they're big and clunky. They fell out of fashion, right? People stopped bringing Hammonds to gigs probably in the 80s at some point when you had other like it became inexpensive to use polyphonic synthesizers basically and samplers, things like that. But how many excellent albums are there with a Hammond organ, a guitar, a drummer, and a bass player, and you could set a synthesizer on top or a mellotron next to the organ, just have a keyboard player and have a guitar player and have a bass player and have a drummer. And there's a lot of great albums, but there aren't as many as I think there should be, and there aren't as many as there could be either. So what I ended up doing is saying, like, I don't think that like 1978 Rainbow or Pink Floyd in that same era, like that 4-piece lineup is like, people just stop doing that because it's inconvenient, not because it's bad. It's really just like, no one can bring, without having an army of roadies, like Pink Floyd would bring multiple Leslies to gigs. Those things are, God, they're like over 100 pounds.
Yeah.
And they'd bring like a synth for every patch. Like in these days, people will just bring one keyboard and just next. And that's so much more convenient. But it's like, the fact that it's so unlimited in sound makes the keyboard sort of feel like an afterthought, or like a backup for the band. Whereas if you have an organ, you're basically stuck with that sound, so you might as well just write it into the music.
You take full advantage of that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like the mono synth, like the classic synth sound where you can only play one note at a time, and then the organ where that's like a huge chord instrument where the guitar can stop playing and the band still sounds big and fat. I thought that was like the sound to try using, and it took forever to put it together, but I really enjoy that type of lineup. I think it sounds good, and I think that you can write any song and make it work in that sound, and you can take any song and cover it in that style, and it works. So the classic rock sound was kind of like not related to the writing of the music at all. It's just like, that was the band that I thought of, that I felt that I could arrange any song to sound good in.
So with that though, a generic description for King Gorm sent out to if someone's looking, say, on one of the Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, and they might see the term that's described for King Gorm underneath, then it'll say something like classic rock, which for some people kind of automatically dates you, even though obviously you're quite a modern band. Is that a hurdle for King Gorm, do you think?
Maybe. I think that it's really hard to say. You've seen bands become wildly successful using that type of a genre tag. Like I think The Darkness is a band that comes to mind as far as like a band that sort of feels retro, that has still fairly modern songwriting, and did pretty well. But again, they took that and used it as a bit of a novelty, and put too much money into advertising, and then they had to like sort of scale back really fast, otherwise they'd all go bankrupt, right? So I think that what happens is you have to be careful with something like that, because you can use it as a cheap ticket to get in front, but once you're there, the novelty will wear off quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be careful with that, and not like, overextend, in case, if something were to catch on, then it's like, oh shit, how do we make this a sustainable thing? You can't just like hang on to like one little novelty. You have to make sure the other stuff is going to stick. And I think the King Gorm album is good, but I don't think it's like radio rock or anything like that. I would be hesitant to like try to push it into the mainstream if I was offered like a giant advertising budget or something, or a major label deal. I would probably feel like we would need to change the sound a bit, or the production style to make it more accessible for people that aren't like fringe genre fans, or like the kind of people that put on an LP and listen to it front to back. Because I know most listeners these days are more casual listeners, right? So you're just putting on a Spotify playlist or something and hoping a song you like comes on. So having like these long interlude tracks doesn't really work well for that, right?
No, I like your thinking, and that. It's interesting as well, because I was going to say about the modern bands that perhaps you maybe look at and think, okay, that would be something worth not necessarily emulating, but something to kind of go, this can work for them. You already mentioned The Darkness. And I've seen one of the things that's popped up a fair bit as another comparative one, and I wonder how you feel about it, is Ghost.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that has been getting thrown around with this. And so I actually first heard about Ghost through my old band, my Old Man Wizard band. And we played a show, I don't know how long ago, kind of a long time ago now. And after the show, someone came up to me and was like, "You guys remind me of Ghost." And I was like, "Who's that?" And he said, "Oh, you got to check it out. It's fantastic." And he pointed me to the demo that they put out before Opus Eponymous.
Oh, yes.
I think it had Elizabeth and Ritual on it. It was a two song, like a 45 or something. And I heard it and I was like, holy shit, these guys are incredible. And I was like, immediately felt like it was a big compliment to be compared to them. And then their first album came out and it was, I think, excellent. And I could see what was going on. Like the guy, Tobias Forge, sings, he's got a similar voice to me in a lot of ways, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the big comparison ends up happening, is that his voice is similar. And then they put out the one that Dave Grohl produced. What is it? The cover album, the cover EP, and then the next album and the next album, and then everyone saw them become famous, and everyone hated Ghost suddenly.
Yeah, it's
and it's
called
the same thing
now.
Yeah, it's like they became famous, so everyone hated them because it's like, oh, and I can see where some of that hatred's coming from. Like they got famous by like pushing themselves as like doom metal and black metal, and they aren't really either of those things, but they recognized that those are communities that like to sort of like hang on to what they've got, and like if you want to make someone that's like a true black metal fan angry, release something that's definitely not black metal and call it black metal, and suddenly you have like a year worth of free advertising by people of that community showing their friends what they shouldn't like.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with Ghost, is that they sort of rode that controversy. It's like if we have an album that's good music, right? Because I think it's really hard to there isn't a very compelling argument for Ghost has bad songs. Like say whatever you want about them, but the songwriting is I think it's top tier, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see Tobias Forge writing the song that goes in the ending credits of movies, or like writing for other artists or whatever it is in 10 years.
Yeah.
He's an excellent songwriter, and maybe heavy metal isn't the genre that people want to hear those songs in, but a good song works in any style. And I think it's a compliment to be compared to someone like that, even if you don't like the band. And I do happen to like Ghost, but I do prefer their first record. I think is right in that sweet spot of like the type of production that I like and the type of songs that I like.
Yeah.
Their new stuff reminds me a bit more of Kiss or something. It's like it's very much like written for the stadium, which is great. I mean, it shows he's writing for his audience.
Yeah.
So he knows that he's famous, and he's writing songs that work better in that stadium. And if you've ever seen a band, I think that I saw I'm sure you're familiar with Mastodon. They became quite popular at some point, but I saw them probably in 2005 opening for Slayer, and they blew me away. It was incredible. I thought they were like the best heavy band I'd ever seen, and went back to see them again years later, and they were playing like more like a headlining spot at a festival, and they sounded like dog shit. And what happened was they're playing these songs with really busy drumming and fast double kicks and stuff in a giant room where it's just you're still hearing the decay and the reverb from the last note 10 notes later. So it just sounds like a mush.
Yeah.
And it sounds excellent on the record, and it sounds excellent in a smaller venue, but in a big stadium, you need to play slower. You need to have less kicks. Like you need to have rhythms that are easy to follow. Otherwise, your audience is going to get completely lost. And that's just kind of how it is. And I think that's why you see some bands that sort of are in a position to become more popular start doing things like, selling out 2 nights in a smaller venue instead of doing one big show. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. It's probably more fun to play the big show, but I think they're doing their fans a service by doing the smaller shows because they're making sure they're going to sound right. So I think that's what happened with bands like Ghost, is that they grow out of their means and they have to they're forced to change their sound and end up, instead of writing like I don't even know what they sound like. I guess Blue Oyster Cult was the comparison that they would get.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of sounding like Blue Oyster Cult, they had to start writing a little bit more like Def Leppard or something.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
Like Def Leppard sort of makes that stadium sound part of their recording with the big reverb on the kicks and the snares, and the big crowd vocals and stuff like that. And they do a great job of emulating that. I think Def Leppard has some excellent songs. And again, with Def Leppard, I think I would prefer the albums were produced differently, but they were trying to sell to that like stadium rock audience. And, in the 80s, that was the audience. Like they were playing the most popular style of music. So it worked. And, I would love to see some underground bands that have a sound that's closer to what I like, cover some of those songs to show the underground that those are great songs. They're just not recorded in a style that you like.
Yeah, okay. I like that thinking. It'll be an interesting conflict for yourself potentially to have years down the line, whether you stick to the conflict of, do we do the 2 venues a night thing and sell them out, or are you big enough to go to a stadium or an arena and play that way?
What a lovely problem to have that would be.
Exactly. It's an odd pairing though. The retro rock in 2020, when the entire world has turned to online platforms to try and keep themselves interested and moving forward as well when it comes to gigging. How are King Gorm and I guess yourself handling the pressure of being a socially active band on the platforms, because there's so many of them now and there's such pressure for you to do it all the time?
Oh God, it's that's I don't even know. I've been just learning technology, constantly trying to keep up with stuff. I do a lot of the production on my projects myself. For that album, I think I really just mixed it. So someone else mastered it and someone else did the engineering on it. But for the Old Man Wizard album I'm working on, I engineered it and mixing and mastering it. So it's like just a lot of different things going on. And I think too, a lot of people that seeing that process and seeing the stuff that goes into a song or a recording is interesting. And I've been doing like music production live streams, and sort of like as a replacement for shows, almost just trying to be consistent with here's showing my process and showing what that looks like, and figuring out how to do the picture in picture where it's my face in the corner talking at at an empty room that hopefully has commenters watching. So a bit of that, and essentially trying to put videos and content together as best as I can to be ready for when and if I can do it the same way I was doing it before. But I don't trust that that'll happen anytime terribly soon. Especially in the United States, just the response here has been just catastrophic, and I don't know what it's like in England right now, but
not great, mate. Not great.
Our government bounces between denying that it's there and having like a some kind of a
we have the mini version of your president and leading.
Yeah, you got what's his name, Boris, right?
That's the geezer.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. What a time to be alive, right? But so I'm not putting a lot of eggs in the things will go back to normal soon, because I don't think normal was working before. So I'm expecting things to go to some other place, and in order to be prepared for whatever that place is, I'm trying to pick up as many new skills as I can right now. So who knows? I'm just trying to go as hard as I can with being able to make an album front to back inside of my own home studio, basically.
Yeah. Can't believe how much you're managing to do in all this time. And the last question was gonna be, well, what plans, if any, because that's the fact of it, do you have for the rest of 2020?
There's a chance that the new Old Man Wizard record will be out before the end of the year.
Cool.
It's close enough to being done, and Church Recordings, the label that put out the King Gorm album, has expressed some interest. I don't want to say that they've picked it up, because it's not, that's not official or anything, but we've talked about it.
Cool.
And it seems like it's possible that they'll put out the next Old Man Wizard record. And I don't know what the timeline on that looks like, but it would be, if it doesn't come out this year, I think the pre-orders might be up, and like maybe a music video or two, or a single will come out. I'm not sure exactly what to expect, but it's more done than I expected it to be, because I've had more time to work on it than I expected.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, I will let you get on then, and I presume we'll come off this call and you'll start making another album. So busy. Francis, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com, as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Tumblr. Go to Patreon to help us out over there. That's patreon.com/GBHBL, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?